Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. Years ago, I found it hard to pay close attention to the conspiracy theorists that you could find on certain fringe websites. Back then, truth did exist in some media, and the conspiracy sites were not as commonly read as they are today. But the more we find out about what's been going on behind closed doors, and not just in Washington, but among other governments globally, the more I'm not just open, but also interested in seeing what's there when you pull back the curtain. For example, why did it take 60 years to see the classified papers on the assassination of John F. Kennedy? And even when the big release happened, we then found out that a lot of the Kennedy papers were still locked in various agencies in and around the nation's capital, and they hadn't been approved for release. Well, here's another, the big financial gain that Dr. Anthony Fauci received during the worst years of the COVID breakout. How did his net worth double between 2019 and 2023 to over $15 million? While at least 20 million people died globally, and while a lot of what he said turned out to be wrong. And what about Facebook, which was involved in helping the Biden White House censor information about COVID? Mark Zuckerberg eventually admitted as much, saying that his decisions were made under pressure from the Biden team. But he finally admitted to what went on only after calculating that Donald Trump might win back in the White House. Seems a bit fishy to me. With new leadership in Washington, I believe we will soon be able to start penetrating these half-truths and find out what really happened. Tonight, we have a key leader in the Senate who's already starting to dig in. He heads up the Senate subcommittee that handles investigations. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Welcome to our show, sir.
Well, Alan, hope you're doing well.
Let's start with Mark Zuckerberg. Clearly, he's played both sides of what Facebook did when COVID was at its peak. First he sided with the Biden team, taking directions from the White House staff. But when it was beginning to look like Donald Trump would be back in office, Zuckerberg put out an explanation. It was a clever sort of a non-apology so that the new team coming to Washington might not take aim at Facebook. It's not just the Biden deal, but you're also going to take a look into what he's been doing with China. Can you tell us a bit more about all that?
Well, I think people need to understand how incredibly powerful these social media companies are. Again, it's been revealed now the extent to which the social media companies, including Facebook, Meta, cooperated with the Biden administration and censored information. I think the most egregious act that I'm aware of currently is the fact that when, for example, I gave a platform for the people who were injured by the COVID injection, their support groups, the types of Facebook groups that they had to communicate with each other, give each other hope, were shut down. And quite honestly, when people lost contact with those support groups, people committed suicide. So to me, that's one of the more egregious actions that Facebook took. But yeah, we're now taking a look at to what extent they are cooperating with the Chinese Communist government in terms of censorship and whatever's required by the Chinese government for Facebook and Meta to be present and be operating within China.
Do you think former President Biden or his family members were involved in trying to smooth the way for Zuckerberg's collaboration with China's Communist Party, given what we've learned about how the Biden family business worked with both China and Ukraine?
It's hard to say. I would say that Zuckerberg is probably doing this, certainly capable of doing it on his own, understanding what's in his corporate interest, not necessarily in the interest of the American public.
Well, let me move to Tony Fauci and his handling of COVID. Your colleague, Rand Paul, seems to have been right from the start about Fauci and what he was up to, not just with his gain of function spending, but we've now learned how much money he made across those years when he mishandled so much of the crisis. In the end, President Biden felt the need to pardon Fauci. Listen to how Rand Paul put that in perspective.
History is going to judge him harshly for accepting this. You don't have to accept a presidential pardon, but if you do accept a pardon, the Supreme Court has ruled that you are also accepting guilt. So he now has accepted guilt or culpability for the pandemic. And going all the way back to 2014, yeah, there were a lot of decisions made. A lot of decisions on funding the research go back a few years before the actual accident occurred. So yes, I'm concerned with this. But I think in the end, this ends up being more damage to Fauci's reputation than just about anything else.
What do you think Fauci and Biden are so determined to hide?
Listen, if you read RFK Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, you'll come to understand that Anthony Fauci is not a good person. In addition to the funding of all the dangerous research, he fast-tracked approval, for example, remdesivir, that even the World Health Organization recommended it's not to use it during the pandemic. When it was used in trials on Ebola treatments, the patients who received remdesivir died sooner than the others. So what I've heard from hospitals and nurses where remdesivir was administered, it was not helpful. But he, sped the approval of that thing as well as I think did everything he possibly could to sabotage the use of other generic drugs to treat COVID. I thought it was scandalous that NIH's guidelines were basically do nothing. If you were diagnosed with COVID, go home, be afraid, hope you don't get so sick that you have to go into a hospital where they'll pump $3,000 worth of remdesivir in your body. Not particularly helpful to people. So I think Anthony Fauci has many, many, many things to account for. I remember very early on in the pandemic during a conference call with Republican senators, when he was talking about shutdowns, I asked him, Dr. Fauci, are you understanding what harm that's going to cause the economy, how devastating that'll be? And basically just blew the question off, going, that's somebody else's department.
Well, from what I understand, another issue that you're going to look into is big pharmaceutical companies, their internal communications and records of the development and safety of vaccines. Tell us what your suspicions are involving those companies.
I think we already know from some of the FOIA documents, the Pfizer papers, that they didn't enter proper dates of people in their trials that died, so they didn't register deaths on time. I think they might have covered up all kinds of problems that they knew about in terms of their injections. And so we've people had to go to court, and again, not against, this is what's really nasty about this, is Pfizer didn't have to defend themselves in court, try and keep their trial data secret for 75 years. The FDA did it on their behalf, which just shows the capture, the corruption within these federal health agencies as well. But we want to know the communication between these vaccine, rather the injection manufacturers and distributors and people within the FDA, CDC, NIH. What did they know and when they know it?
Well, Senator Johnson, please stay with us for another segment. We've got a lot more to discuss.
Okay.
And later in the program, I'll share a few of my thoughts on how we can process all of this with a bit of a biblical perspective. Before we finish, your emails, your questions and thoughts about the fast-moving world we live in. We'll be right back. We're back now with Wisconsin's Republican Senator Ron Johnson. He's also the chairman of the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Let me ask you about the fight that's brewing over one of your home state judges, Hannah Dugan, who's been on the Milwaukee County bench since 2016. She's the one who allegedly directed a previously deported man and his attorney out a non-public jury door to escape being taken by ICE agents. The Attorney General says that no one is above the law, and that includes a judge. Listen to Pam Bondi's comments.
I found out about this the day it happened. We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. We looked into the facts in great depth. That's her picture up on the screen, Hannah Dugan, who is now in custody. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case of all cases, and she's protecting a criminal defendant over victims of crime.
The judge says she'll contest the charges. Do you think your home state officials will remove her from office?
Well, my guess, we have we don't have the supermajority in our legislature, so I doubt Democrats will vote to convict her if the Assembly impeaches her. But the fact of the matter is, she's an officer of the court. As Pam Bondi and FBI director have said, nobody's above the law. I would say that a judge, officer of the court, should actually be held to a higher standard. So I'm, once I've read the particulars, and again, still allegations, but it looks like a pretty solid case to have against her. Any other American would be arrested and prosecuted for obstruction of justice she should as well. I would say in her case, because she's an officer of the court, my guess the penalty should be stricter than a non-judge, a non-officer of the court.
Well, Tom Homan and Kristi Noem have done a great job so far capturing some of the worst criminals. Do they have the support from your colleagues in the Senate, even any Democrats, especially if they need to get a few more resources to get the job done?
Well, we saw Chris Van Hollen and Cory Booker run down to El Salvador. Or at least Chris Van Hollen did. I'm not sure that Cory Booker sounded like he wanted to. Again, to defend an MS-13 gang member that is abusive to people and has committed crimes and been deported. So that, I don't know they attended the funeral of the women who've been raped and murdered by some of these illegal immigrants. So again, their priorities, their sympathies are completely misplaced. So no, I wouldn't expect any support from Democrat senators or House members. This is what they wanted. They wanted an open border. They were happy to let at least 10 million people completely unvetted flood into this country, criminals, sex traffickers, human traffickers, drug traffickers, members of transnational criminal organizations flood into this country, and now they want full adjudication. That they want to give these criminals the full protection of American citizens' constitutional rights. Again, we need to be able to swiftly get rid of these people out of our country.
Well, the economy is in transition with big cutting by the Elon Musk team and then tariff negotiations. On the Hill, the focus is on the big budget bill and what's going to happen with tax rates. The House Speaker sounds pretty confident about getting a deal done, and the White House certainly knows that unless the economy gets an injection of something positive and stabilizing, the longer-term effect on Republicans in power will be in jeopardy. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I want to see much more emphasis placed on reducing the level of spending down to a reasonable pre-pandemic level. I've been writing about this. I've been talking about it. I've been talking about a process more like a private sector where you literally go through the thousands of individual line item of expenditures like Elon Musk is doing in contracts. It's the only way you can do this. You have to put in the work. And unfortunately, this process is being rushed. I've always supported a three-step process, provide President Trump the funding he needs to secure the border, defense funding. Then what I would do is I would just extend current tax law. I don't like it. It's complex. It needs to be simplified. But if we do that, we take a massive tax increase off the table, then come back and start working on the big, beautiful, very complex, quite honestly, very hard to pass bill. Again, I'm not liking what I'm seeing right now in terms of the big, beautiful bill.
Well, I know that you're also working hard to ensure that people who are on Social Security continue to get the benefits they've earned. You're also looking into the fraud in the program. How widespread is it, and why is it so easy to steal from our government?
Because our government's inept. That's a real shocker. Again, nobody's really looking at these things. Congress has constitutional authority to do oversight, but the administrations simply don't give information to Congress. We've allowed that constitutional authority to atrophy. We don't really use what enforcement mechanisms we've had. So the only way we're going to really start getting in and do some detailed audits of the federal government is if a president was willing to do it. President Trump was, with Elon Musk and their Doge effort, but what he's identifying, that has to be codified in some way, shape, or form, either through the reconciliation process on mandatory spending or rescission process, because Democrats won't do it through the appropriation process. So again, we got a long way to go to actually realize the savings, but what Doge has done is they've uncovered really how oblivious Congress basically is to the waste, fraud, and abuse. I think we all suspect it, but now Doge is uncovering exactly how wasteful, how fraudulent, how abusive the federal government is with the hard-earned taxpayer money or the money we're borrowing for these programs that's mortgaging our children's future.
Well, Senator Johnson, we are honored that you took the time to be with us today. Please come back again when you have time. We'd love to hear your follow-up on these investigations that you're working on.
Have a great day. Stay well.
Thank you. And when I come back, a solid dose of truth and hope, what the Bible says to us about working through the disinformation that's out there. When you look at the legacy news media, you can pick the topic. The common thread is fear. fear that tariffs will wipe away our savings, fear that ICE will come knocking on doors and dragging away people who are here legally. It's illogical. Well, this current season reminds me a great deal of 2020 when we faced a pandemic. In 2020, I had absolute confidence in the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. I can explain a bit. My father was a veterinarian. I started my college career in the basic sciences. I'm very comfortable following the science. I don't think it violates my commitment to faith, my belief in God, or my belief in the Bible. What gave me pause was science doesn't change at a state line. The science in Tennessee should be the same as the science in California or the science in New Jersey. And that's not what we watched happen. I listened to the director of the CDC at the time, Dr. Fauci, begin to make statements that weren't accurate with what I was watching happen in the midst of the people with whom I was doing life. There were all these random instructions that were issued as if they were rooted firmly in scientific fact. Cover your face, even if it's with a bandana. Stay 6 feet apart, social distance. Put up plexiglass, because we all know plexiglass is the great destroyer of viruses. Our churches were told to close because churches were deemed non-essential. Well, to make matters worse, churches complied almost universally and remained silent. Well, I have a question. As Christ followers, have we learned any lessons? Will we respond differently this time around? Will we have the courage to speak up for truth, or will we stay silent in fear again? The consequences of stating our beliefs have changed over time. We know today that if we say we are Christ followers and we intend to live by biblical values, that insults and persecution are possibilities. We tell ourselves that we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to be obnoxious. We don't want to force our faith on anyone else. We don't want to be judgmental. Well, listen to Jesus' perspective. This is Matthew 5:11. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. As Christ followers, let's not take the easy way out when we have the opportunity to speak truth into our culture and share about our commitment to our faith. Let's have the courage to stand for our convictions, declare our allegiance to the Lord who's done so much for us. I believe if we'll do that, there are many more reasons for hope than despair. When we come back, we're going to read your emails. Thank you for taking the time to send your emails. Your thoughts and opinions are always a highlight. Debbie emailed, "Greetings, AJ Now team. I saw your interview with Director Vitiello. We're fortunate to have his and his team's courage and drive to push onward. Blessed for all that you and your team do. I signed up for your Friday updates." Well, thank you, Debbie. And if you haven't yet signed up, you can sign up for our weekly recap. It's an email. You just go to ajnow.com and there's a place there for you to sign up. You'll get it every Friday in your inbox. Pamela H. from Winstead, Connecticut. How is it that illegal aliens are allowed to have taxpayer-funded counsel when they aren't a citizen and should not have the benefits that American citizens enjoy? How can a judge rule against American laws and their decision is final? There's so much wrong with this kind of fakery. Well, Pamela, I agree. The lawfare is being exposed, and I believe that's good news. When the deception and the misbehavior is exposed, there's an opportunity for it to be corrected and changed. And I believe we will see that. Let's keep telling the truth and keep praying. Michael P. from Fleming Island, Florida. I love your show. Thank you for spreading truth. Great job tackling the issue of climate change. Well, day by day, show by show, our goal is to share a bit of the truth with you in the midst of all of the turmoil and the confusion. It's like a tidal wave of disinformation and deception. God still gives us ways to see the truth and navigate through this. We can be salt and light in this world. It's our honor and it's our assignment. Finally, I'd like to say that with your help, we're getting more and more people watching our show each week. Truth and hope cuts through all the noise. I can see it in the emails we receive. Those of you who write telling us how grateful you are to have found a place where you can trust what you hear. The world is certainly challenging enough to navigate. If you also have to navigate what's real and what's fake, it's really difficult. So let's keep going. I'd like to ask you to invite a friend or a neighbor to watch along. Spread the word and we'll spread the truth. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Alan Jackson, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Good evening.